Hello and welcome. Today we will be discussing a new book, The Challenger Sale. This is the book. Gotta bring it in the camera. So this is a book by Matthew Dixon and Brent Adamson. And it says right here, how to take control of the customer conversation. It's a bit of a complicated book. It uses a lot of complicated terminology. So it's a bit difficult to read. Yeah, I do think it was a good read. I do think the terminology prevents it from reading smoothly, but at the same time, it kind of gives you more insights or more specific insights than if they were to use just general terms. So I think on one side, I think it's a bit. I don't really like all the, the difficult reading and the more, the sentences are formulated in a way that you really need to think about each sentence. And it's good in a way, but also in another way, it's bad because it's not as intuitive. But I still think it's a good book. Now, the book is recommended by Neil Rackham, which is the author of Spin Selling, a very famous sales book. I haven't read that yet, unfortunately, but Neil Rackham really recommends The Challenger Sale, which is, it's this book. And he says basically that it's a very good book because it points to where the future of sales is heading to. So it gives you an idea of what's kind of present and what's also going to help in the future. So the main idea of the book is kind of that the way we think about sales is wrong. So it says that usually what we think about salespeople is that they're people who are very good at relationships, but they kind of challenge this notion. And what they say is that good salespeople aren't just people who are great at making people feel good, but they actually help the customer get somewhere. And that's really what's going to help drive the sale, both for, helping the customer and both for helping yourself. So it argues that actually this will boost your customer loyalty and your results. And even at the end of the book, it will say that actually this is a better way of making relationships, because you're not just there to please the person, you're mainly there to help them get somewhere, which is what is going to drive results for both you and your customer. Now, Matthew Dixon and Brent Adamson, they claim they did a very scientific study. So they studied thousands of sales reps. And among these, they looked for certain personality traits and certain styles of selling. And they noticed that certain traits kind of grouped together organically. So that way, they actually found 5 distinct sales personality types, which I will talk about in a bit. Now, the book starts off by saying that sometimes there are tough economic periods and complex sales processes that will cause a lot of companies to just, go extinct. But fortunately, there are some companies who still stand tall. And usually that's due to a few salespeople who are really great at managing these tough times. And these are actually the challengers. So these are people who can still perform in this really difficult economic situation where it's really hard and complex to convince people. But what they say here, and this is kind of the evolution of sales. This has been like this for a while. But what they say is that sales is shifting from product selling to solution selling. Now, that's already been this way for a couple of years. But what's happened in the past is that people just make a product. They just think of they make some kind of product and then they sell it. But now the shift is, we're not just making a product, we're actually making a solution to a certain problem that a certain customer has. So in that way, it's already more efficient to sell. And then the way you're going to sell that, you're actually going to be very specific to the customer pain points. And we'll dive into that later on. Now, even though we've been into solution selling for a couple of years, it's important to notice that the solutions are becoming more and more complex. So for decision makers, they are more wary to start with these things because they involve often more risk, and the things they're selling, they're more complex. So they feel like they have to be better aware and feel better about it before they're going to actually buy. So that's why the sales process is getting tougher as well, and why we have to be a salesperson, we have to be aware of that. Now, as I was talking about earlier about the scientific test that they did, well, they basically found 5 distinct personality types, 5 distinct selling types for salespeople in general. And those are these: the hard worker, the relationship builder, the lone wolf, the challenger, and the problem solver. Now, the hard worker is someone who is driven and who always wants to go the extra mile and doesn't go up easily. Those are the people that are really attentive when people say things like, hey, well, we need to do more reps. We need to do more dials and talk to more people. And well, I'm not going to go into the results just yet, but those are that kind of people. Then you have the relationships builders, who are people that are very pro, like building a good relationship and a professional relationship, and making sure that every problem and everything that the customer doesn't feel comfortable with is solved. Then there's the lone wolf, who is independent, who follows their instincts and is often difficult to manage, but they often get great results. Then there are the problem solvers. So those are people who quickly respond to the needs of the customers and will solve those problems for them. And they are sure that they're addressed quickly. And then there's the challenger. Now, the challenger has a deep understanding of the customer's business and industry. He loves to debate, and he isn't actually even afraid to push the customer to help them go out of their comfort zone. Those are the 5 types: the hard worker, the relationship builder, the lone wolf, the problem solver, and the challenger. Now, they found with that research that they did that the relationship builder is actually the worst performer. So, and that the challenger is actually the best performer, and it's by quite a large margin. And they also realized that when the sales process is not difficult, so when it's a fairly simple process, all 5 types will perform the best. And actually the hard worker will perform the best because he's doing more work, and the sales process is simple, so he gets the best results. But the more complex the sales environments get, the more the challenger will really start to dominate everyone else, because he understands the process the most, and he's also most skillful in handling the customer needs. So that's when the challenger really rocks in that way. He's the best. Then the second one is the lone wolf, where people, they can't really follow instructions, but they kind of like, they describe it as live by the sword, die by the sword. So there are people who are very results oriented, but they can't function that well in the group. They're very independent. So company leaders, they're great because they're happy with them because they get them great results, but they're also frustrated because they can't listen to directions. So those are the second best performers, the lone wolf. And then I think it was the hard worker, then the problem solver, and then the relationship builder was the worst of all. And I think actually that's because they probably were thinking about a relationship builder that they're just like too much in like order taker mode and too much just pleasing the other person. But actually they argue that the challenger actually builds the best relationships. So I do think that relationship building is great, but you have to do it in a constructive and a challenging way that keeps constructive pressure, because that's why the customer is there. You're there to help him get to another level, basically, especially when you're selling B2B. Now, we're going to take a deep dive into what that actually is and how do we become a challenger as salespeople. So there's actually 3 different elements to that. Those are teach, tailor, and take control. And the book actually has specific sections to explain each one of those traits. So I'm going to just briefly give an overview here. Teaching is like, well, being able to make sure that you're professional and that you have something to teach your customer about how to run a better business and actually have insights that can help him, and that in that specific area more than him. Maybe you're aware of some kind of problem that they have, and you also know the solution to that. That way you can teach him, and that's one important trait. The other trait is tailoring. So that means that you're able to tailor what you have to every specific individual you're talking to. I mean, that's a very general thing in sales. You have to be able to adjust to the person that you're talking to be able to resonate more with that person. And that's what tailoring does. Basically, that means that you're going to have to be aware of their personality, but also mainly the specific problems they're dealing with. So maybe it's because they run another business, or maybe because they have another way of doing marketing. Whatever it is, you're able to tailor to the specific person that you're selling to, or whatever you want to call it. Then that is teach and tailor. Now the third trait is take control. So you have to be able to do that in order to guide the conversation and steering them to making decisions that they might be uncomfortable with, because you have to take them out of their comfort zone. And the key here is to have constructive tension, which I will talk about in a bit. But those are the three traits: teach, tailor, and take control. So now we're going to take a deep dive into the first trait, which is teaching. Now, I already kind of explained what that is. Like, you have to be able to give insights to your customer. And that's important because they want a solution, and you want to be the person that is the expert on that. So you want to be able to know of a problem that maybe they don't even know they have. And you also want to know you have the solution to that. But the book says that you have to be careful, because you can't just give them value and then have them running away with some other some other people who is going to offer them something. You want them to buy your solution, and this means that your solution has to be tailored to their problem, and it has to be tailored to what you're delivering in the pitch or presentation, whatever you want to call it, or in the meeting. Which means they actually discuss 4 pillars. Lead to your strengths. So whatever you're discussing, the problem that you're going to be solving for them, make sure it's something that portrays you, that you're going to be that person, that you have what it takes to solve that problem that you're discussing here with them, which is why they're going to buy your solution. Then make sure that you were able to challenge their assumptions. So maybe they have certain traditional notions or certain conventional notions that you're going to have to challenge. Maybe some ideas that they don't follow you in your thinking. Then it's important that you're able to, convert them and convince them. But also, in order to actually do that properly, you're going to have to really dig through their reasoning and just debate with them and show them what you know, basically. So that's challenging their assumptions. You're going to have to do a little bit of a debate with them and showing them that perhaps what they're thinking, like maybe there's a better way. The third pillar is catalyzing action. So not just teaching them and, now they know they have a solution. No, actually, stimulate them to actually take the action to boost their company. That's the third pillar. And the fourth pillar is to scale across customers. And what they mean with that is that actually the whole challenger sell model, it's not something that just has to be implemented by salespeople. It's actually something that needs to be adapted by the entire company, because the product and the solution that you're selling needs to be tailored to the model. So it needs to be something that is specific solve the specific pain point for the customer. So often that's going to be the job of like the marketing or like the business development. And so you need to make sure that the people who are actually running the business are actually implementing the sales model. And then those people are going to have the frameworks, the organization is going to have the insights and the products that actually the salespeople can then sell. And then the salespeople just need to be challenging on what the product already does. So that's important. And also it's that we need to tailor it to each specific customer. So we need to make sure that the organization doesn't just come with a solution for a group of people, but also that you know how to tailor that to specific individuals within that group or specific subgroups within that group, so that you know people understand how to sell better and how to convince those people better, because you can tailor to them. That's teaching. Now I will get you through the entire model, the entire meeting, the entire presentation that they suggest here. The first step they suggest is a warmer, which is building credibility by showing understanding of the customer's world. So showing him that you know that maybe they have a specific problem, or at least that you know how the way their business operates. Then you need to reframe, which is basically offering insights that challenges some of the customer's assumptions. So maybe the customer is doing something, you know, in a specific way, and you challenge that. You make him understand that, hey, what you're doing, maybe it's not the best way. Maybe there's a better way. Now, then you reframe. Then you need to deliver rational insights. So what this means is then you need to present data and facts that actually highlights what you've been discussing there and highlights the challenges or issues with his current approach. So you need to have actual data to back them up and convince them. Then once they are convinced of like the logical side, hey, you know, what you're saying actually makes sense. Now you have to deliver an emotional impact. So then you need to connect those problems identified to the customer's personal or organizational pain points. So then you need to know actually, well, what they're dealing with, what's difficult to them. And then you need to show them that, well, actually, that's something that's really hurting them. And what you have is actually the solution to that. That's the emotional impact. So you don't just convince them logically, you also convince them emotionally. That's really going to help them. Then the other thing is like the other pillar is like presenting a new way, so proposing a new and better way of solving the problems. Then you need to present yourself as the person or the organization that is going to deliver that for them. So this is it. The warmer, you build credibility by showing that you understand them. The reframe, you offer insights that kind of challenge what the customer is doing. You back it up with data, the rational approach. You make sure it gives them an emotional impact. So you make sure that they actually feel that, well, you know, they're having a problem and you're the person that can solve them for that. And then you propose a new way. There's a better way of doing things. And then you say that, well, I'm the solution to that. I have a solution to that, the problem that you're facing, Mr. Customer. And we're going to make sure that you're going to be well taken care of. Basically, that's the framework that they present here. Now, they also have a chapter about tailoring, tailoring for resonance. Now, most salespeople already know that you have to tailor the message to the specific person that's in front of you, but they have a very specific approach. And I also think that's, well, part of it is that they're challenging the status quo, but I think the other part of it is that they're discussing like a really complex sales process, like probably selling to really high-level companies. So what they say is that traditionally people just sell to the CEO and they kind of avoid other people in the organization because the CEO is the ultimate decision maker. And what they say, they challenge that approach and they say that actually you have to talk to all the people in the organization. You have to talk to the COO, the CFO, the CMO, the CTO, the secretary, the gatekeeper. You're going to have to talk to all those people. and you have to tailor your message to each of them. So maybe when you're dealing with the IT leader, you're going to have to tailor that and make them see that your product is something that's going to simplify his process, going to simplify his way of the way that he needs to manage data or the way that he needs to run his programs. When you're talking to the CMO, you're going to have to convince him that, hey, this is going to like simplify the marketing campaign. This is going to boost your results. This is going to boost your click-through rate or whatever. And when you're talking to the CFO, you're going to have to convince him that, hey, well, this is going to, take care of your budget and make sure that you maybe have budget for other things. So you're going to have to be aware of what each of those people do in that specific company. And the more you can tailor to that specific person, the better. And what they say is that once each of those people is convinced, then what's going to happen is that everyone of his company is going to start selling to the CEO for you, which is like, it seems like a super great thing if you do have like the time and the energy to invest into that. But it does say that it's worth it because, the sales cycles are becoming more complex and decision makers want to feel like they have the support of the team before they make a decision. Now, I do think that, this process that you're discussing here is talking about really high level companies. But I mean, it does seem like an interesting approach, and that's what they're talking about here with tailoring for resonance. The other part of the book, of course, is about taking control of the sale. So they talk about why that is important here. They talk about the importance of assertiveness. So it doesn't mean being aggressive or overbearing. Instead, it's about being assertive and guiding the sales process. So the assertive salespeople, they are confident in the value they bring, and they aren't afraid to steer the conversation in a direction that is going to help both the customer and the sale. Assertiveness is key in situations where the customer might push back, where negotiations become tough. The challenger rep knows when to push back, ensuring that the sales process doesn't become derailed by unnecessary concessions. So when a customer is being difficult, you're going to have to make sure that you push that customer in a good way with constructive tension, and that you're able to debate with him about what's the best way to move forward. That's one thing. That's being assertive is super important. Then the other part is managing the tension. So a big part of taking control is managing the natural tension that arises during sales conversations, particularly when challenging customers' existing beliefs or practices. So yeah, that's going to be a big part. Like when you're in the sales process, the customer may be feeling uncomfortable, maybe you're feeling uncomfortable. Well, that's one really big part of taking control. It's just like being confident and managing that tension that exists. That's going to go a long way. Now, challenger reps are comfortable with this tension because they understand that it's often necessary to drive change. They don't shy away from difficult conversations and are skilled at using tension to keep the sale on track. So they're actually using tension to make sure the sales is constructive and to make sure that they're even going to push the customer if that customer is not going in the right direction. Now, the book discusses how tension, when managed well, can actually build the customer respect for the salesperson, as it shows the commitment to actually delivering real value rather than just agreeing to everything the customer says. So that's an important point. When you're actually disagreeing with that person and you're doing it in a good way, you're doing it in a way where you're delivering value, the other person is going to appreciate that because, well, they don't know all the solutions. And so you're actually there to bring value to them and help them improve their beliefs. Well, that's what's going to get them better results. So then they're not going to like you for that, but they're going to respect you for that. Okay, the other part is controlling the conversation. So we need to control the conversation rather than follow the customer's lead. This involves setting the agenda. So we start the meeting with a clear purpose, even explaining why we're there and what's going to happen. And make sure we stay focused on what's important. Now, here it's important to, we want to we want to take control, but we also need to make sure the customer is feeling, is feeling comfortable enough. We need to make sure we're asking the right questions. So we're going to ask questions that are actually going to help guide the sale and guide the customer to making constructive decisions for his business. Redirecting when necessary. So if a conversation goes off course, you bring it back to what's actually relevant for the sale and for the customer. So one of the most empowering tool that we have as salespeople and as challengers is the ability to create constructive tension. Personally, I think that Andy Elliott is a great example of that. But in general, it's something that we need to have as salespeople. So this is a tension that arises when the rep challenges the customer's status quo in a way that highlights the urgent needs for change. So we actually need to help them become the better version of themselves that they actually want to become, but something is holding them back, and we need to push them in a constructive way. The book explains that this kind of tension is productive because it drives the customer to action, often leading to faster decision-making and a greater willingness to consider a rep solution. So, well, it helps the sale because, you're basically pushing the customer, but you're not just helping the sale, you're actually also helping the customer. And that's important because if the customer doesn't feel that you're there to help him, you're just there to make the sale, then, he's not going to like that and you're not going to make the sale. So you have to build constructive tension that's going to push the customer to take actions that are helpful to himself and his business. The last part of the book goes over the implementation of the challenger sales model. Now, this actually talks more to business leaders than salespeople themselves, but they talk about, what's important if you're like a sales leader, what's important, how can you motivate your salespeople, how are you going to have to deal with some of the resistance that comes. Some people are going to be like, hey, that's not me. I don't want to be aggressive. I don't want to challenge people. I'm just going to be nice to people. And then, as a sales leader, you're going to have to, be able to handle that pressure and make sure that people are moving towards that direction. And it gives several tactics of doing that. And one of the important things that it mentioned that I remember is debating. So there's going to be resistance. It's going to be a tough process, but actually, because the process is tough, it's going to stick with people more and it's going to make people think more. So don't be afraid to, rock some things, but, make sure that things are going in the right way. That's basically it. It also mentions that those people who don't want to rock the boat, they just want to be nice. They're often great at customer experience, but not necessarily as salespeople. Because as salespeople, we need to have that constructive tension. That's it. There's more tips and advice in the book. I actually think it speaks more to business leaders than salespeople. But for me, I'm not just a salesperson. I'm also a businessman. It seems like a great book. I do advise reading it. Now, I don't think that everything they explain in the book is going to be applicable to most businesses today, but I do think some of the concepts are very insightful. And I also think that it's probably very helpful to help really large companies. I don't think everything of the book is applicable to smaller companies, but I still think some of the insights are really worth going through. So that's my review. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time. Cheers.